to it. Dr. Maria Montessori, in Creative Development in the Child, Volume 2, Kletterkshetra Press, and I use the 1998 version. It's in page 42, if you're interested to find this quote. She said, "We admire the freedom in nature, yet in nature, everything is tied by laws. These protective laws from the base of discipline, which renders that freedom possible. The stars and planets are free in the space of the universe, yet they obey laws. The stars and planets have their routes to follow. We must say among the living beings, fish are the most free, and yet they cannot get out of water. So each being, animate or inanimate, is free within its ties, within those limits that nature has tied it up with. Freedom is thus to obey the laws to perfection, with attention to the minutest detail." So this quote, I want to bring us back to it because there are important messages in this one. First of all, it's talking about laws. Without limits, without laws, we don't even know what to obey. We don't know how to design our actions. It's like, can you imagine the world without traffic lights and with a lot of, strange drivers driving around? Under the circumstances, when there is traffic light, we have crazy drivers already. This morning, I was reading a piece of news. Downtown Denver, 18th and Lawrence, a woman was delivering food and her car was T-boned. And you can imagine what happened to her. And I don't understand it, right? It's downtown Denver. How fast can you drive? Why would you T-bone someone? And so it's unimaginable that, if we don't follow the laws that is protecting us to make sure of our safety, then there is going to be chaos and there is going to be consequences, right? So that says to us that in our prepared environment, the first thing as an adult we need to do is to define the laws in our environment. I'm not saying that you want to play police, but I'm saying you need to set up the environment in a way that children can follow. How you arrange your furniture will define their movement. If you design in a way that there is a big empty space, that's an invitation for running. So when I create my environment, I create narrow spaces for them to move around. But I also leave enough open space for them to put their tables there and also their rugs over there so they can work over there. So a narrow space is not a bad thing. However, all you need to do is to show them grace and courtesy. When you pass by a narrow space, how do you yield and how do you request other people to yield so that you can pass by instead of bumping into each other? So there is a tangible environment that shape our movement, shape our behavior, but there is the social interaction part that we as adults can introduce to children. That's the law. Grace and courtesy is a law. Grace and courtesy is how we as human beings interact in a social environment. So that involves language, that involves movement. Okay, so that's just one example of what law means in a prepared environment for children. It doesn't work when you say a lot to the children, well, you need to wait until that person passes over, pass by, then you can go get your thing. You got to give them a way to repeat, to interact. And that becomes part of themselves, meaning that grace and courtesy, they have been practicing it for so long and everyone is using it. Then it becomes their social norm. So that is what I call the soft law, right? It's soft. It is, it is developmental. Children are able to slowly, ingrain it inside of them. That is one kind of law. But there were hard laws that I talked about the last time. We have 3 hard laws. If they hurt themselves, either, action-wise or verbal-wise, it is not allowed. They cannot do that to other people as well. It is not allowed. And they may not damage the material that is beneficial to their development. That's hard laws. Okay, that is called basic safety, right? So the last time I ended up with talking about, I don't understand, why do we need to own guns? I mean, it's a totally different conversation. But in the children's world, we also have that hard law. I mean, children come to school to me and they're intact as one, complete human being. And when I send them home, they have a black eye. I do have to say something to the parents. I mean, what happened? Why does my child have black eye? I mean, we understand that children, because they are not yet mature, so a lot of the times they are not able to control their movement enough to not hurt other children. But it doesn't mean that it's okay. If I catch it before they already hurt other children, I would stop them. I totally would. I wouldn't just watch them. Let's see if he's really going to hit that child. I would never risk it. Okay. I mean, just imagine if you're a parent yourself, you wouldn't let it happen. Okay. So, I don't yell across the room most of the time, but if I see danger, I do. Someone is taking scissors and trying to cut someone else's hair, but there is also a danger of that child might cut the ear. I would definitely, no, stop. I would just say, no, stop. And I would go over right away and say, put the scissors in my hand. And we walk away and say, it looks like you want to cut something. Let's go find paper for you to cut. So you gotta steer it around, okay? So let's go find some paper for you to cut. That is the law, because scissors are used for cutting. It's okay if you're a hair stylist, you can cut someone else's hair, but you are not there yet. So developmentally, it is not okay. But you're not going to explain it to children. So you want to give them an outlet that can really benefit them. So that kind of, hard rule, I am pretty strict about it. So it's just one of the examples. But there is another part of, with this quote, another part of it is that, every being should have limit, and we need to respect that limit. When she said, The fish amongst all of us, they're the most free, yet they cannot get out of water. Okay, it means that the laws are there to protect us. The limit is there to guarantee our not just survival, but allow us to thrive. Fish can only thrive in water. Otherwise, they're going to have to thrive as a dead fish. And that requires a great cook to make it a very good looking dead fish or a very tasty dead fish. It is someone else's thriving, not the fish thriving. So our children is the same thing. If our environment cannot address their developmental needs, this environment is not suitable for that being to be there. So that's why last time I talked about limits. There are two directions. One direction is what we do with the children. But the other thing is that we as an adult, we need to take our responsibility and design the prepared environment in a way that is responding to their developmental needs. Otherwise, all we do is arbitrarily requesting the children to follow certain rules without the context. So the prepared environment is the context. That is why every piece of material, there is only one set. That is why our environment, everything is tangible and allow children to manipulate. And that is why we build in the control of errors or point of interest so that children, they can correct themselves. Okay? So all of that is part of what we call limit. Okay? So I want to talk about there are two different kinds of disciplines, which is eventually the goal with our environment. We want to help children to have the freedom. In order to be free, it means that they have the self-discipline. Only when you have the ability to control your movement and to use your words properly for communication, it means that you have the intelligence, then you are able to follow the laws. Like I said, children of very young age, a lot of the times when someone invades their space, what is their choice? Push that person away or bite them. That is very direct communication. You're in my space. Get out of my face. I don't have the words yet, so I'm going to bite you. Okay? So discipline requires ability. Without development, without ability, there's no way that they can be disciplined. You can tell them, you should not bite people. Don't bite. No biting. You can tell them 10,000 times. They don't have that word. They don't have that self-control. They're going to bite. So we're going to talk about there are two types of discipline. One type is called the internal discipline. Okay. Internal discipline is what we're born with. It is a human characteristics. It is present. It doesn't matter what color you are, what race you are, what gender you are, or, whatever age you are. The inner order is, you're born with that inner order, which is what we call the horme, which is what we call the human tendencies. Okay? We are born to love order. So look at our human body. We follow the laws of nature as well. All of us, we all look different. but we all have a pair of eyes, a pair of ears, a pair of nostrils. We have one mouth, and we have two hands, two legs. That's part of the order of this human species. When we are out of order, there are special needs that need to be addressed. Okay. And also how we function internally, we also have an order. Like how we develop, there is an order as well. There's a sequence of development. And in order to develop, you must provide the children with real stimuli. Children are born to move. So it's impossible to ask young children to sit still for a long period of time. Try that. I can only say good luck, right? Either you force them, that might work, but that is really sending children to despair because they cannot fight us. We tie them down, right? And after a while of fighting, they need to survive. So they just stop fighting and they become dormant. They're like, okay, I'll sit still. I'll just be like that because I'm your good boy. Children grow into despair and they lose their will. They lose their inner order. Children are born to explore the world. So if we stop them, this inner order, or we call it the inner discipline, will be disturbed. And there is going to be something very wrong with this human being. Depending on the child's, what we call what they're naturally born with. We have many different kinds of types of humans. Some are more strong-willed. They'll keep fighting. They become really stubborn. Some are more submissive. They'll just like, okay, I'll accept it. Depending on their, quality. But there is also external discipline. Okay, the external discipline is developed. It is not what we're born with. So we know that each and every society, each and every culture has their own norms and requirements. They exist in the society. So they're more like the tracks, allowing the trains to run smoothly, right? So the inner discipline must be supported by this external discipline, which is our prepared environment, which is the society, the family. We provide the external discipline. So when we live in different cultures, the different cultural norms needed to be followed. So like say when I first moved to America, I got so mad at my husband one time. We were just dating, but we went to store and I was like, do I want to date this person again? Because he did one thing that was unimaginable in my culture. We went to the store and then he was paying for grocery and he just put the credit card on the table, on the counter. And he just, tossed it. I was totally in shock because in Taiwan, this is how we do it. We want to give people money or a credit card. We do it this way. We hand it out with two hands until they accept it, then we let go. Okay. So I was like, why are you doing that to that lady? she was nice, and why did you throw it at her? And he was totally in shock too. He was like, yeah, I was paying. I was like, but you threw it on the table. And he was like, is there anything wrong with it? I said, that is very wrong. You're not nice and you're not kind. Just because you're paying doesn't mean you're better. Why do you do that? So in my culture, that is one part of the grace and courtesy we do in my classroom. We actually show children how to hand things over to someone else's hands in a very polite way. It is my grace and courtesy lesson, part of it, but not necessarily in every culture. But if you're living in Japan, it's even more, right? Japanese culture, they don't just hand it over, but they might bow, right? Because it is part of their cultural norm. Okay, but my behavior as a result in the American society is interpreted as being a little bit strange. People look at me like, are you okay? So it's cultural. Okay, so the external discipline, you must design it according to your culture. For, at least for the 3 to 6 age group. However, for the elementary, it will be a little bit different. They can learn about other cultures and how they do it. So when they encounter people from different cultures, they can choose their customs. They can choose their social norms. But in our children's house, all of it is designed according to our very own culture. So children, they will learn about their own social etiquette. They will learn about the very specific group of people, which is, we're living in America, so it's the American culture in general. So we become the filter of their external discipline. We set the limit. That's what we're talking about, the limit. You cannot just tell the children. You have to design it and allow them to practice. Okay? So how you greet other people and all of that. However, in order to do all of that, you must allow children to develop their control of movement. They must develop their language. Otherwise, there's no possibility they can use their social norms. How would the children know that they are not supposed to run in the environment? They don't know. There's a space. What would you not do? Why wouldn't you run? Of course you run. They run because they are not able to control their body yet. So we show them, oh, we're indoor. Come and walk with me. You play games with them so that they know that in the environment, they walk. So I would just tell the children, we walk here. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of furniture. Let's walk from this point to the next point and watch how I walk. So that is setting limit. That's what I said. Our presentations are actually limits because that set a goal for their development. We are what they follow. But once they have all of that etiquette, they have all of that, they understand the external discipline, then they can help with that internal discipline to work with the social etiquette. And it becomes the child's own creation. Okay, then this human being is more free. So in order to grant children freedom, we must create certain conditions, right? So this is what Dr. Maria Montessori said. The balance between freedom for the individual and the needs of the group is another special feature of social education in the Montessori method. One can speak of a true community only when each member of the group feels sufficiently free to be himself or herself, while simultaneously restricting his or her own freedom for the sake of adjustment to the group. This requires so much will. Once you can control your movement, you can control your language, then you have to decide when and how you utilize them. And that is intelligence and will. So without us as adults set very clear parameter, give very clear presentations and examples, children are not able to understand the limit. And then they cannot develop that will to allow them to be free. So the conditions are that we need to prepare an environment that corresponds to the child's inner directives, meaning the human tendencies, the absorbent mind, the sensitive periods, the 4 planes of development. All of those are what we call the conditions. You must observe and satisfy their developmental needs. And the second condition is that the constructive work must be based on knowledge. It means that whatever we provide the children must be constructive work based on knowledge. Work based on knowledge provides the child a sense of direction while they're exploring the new concepts. It means that our prepared environment must be scientific. We must understand the science behind all of the materials so that we can give children the kind of work that is constructive and also based on science. And we also need to create a condition that satisfy the needs of the social community. So our prepared environment is the goal is to aid the development of inner order of the child. So the inner order can only develop through the external order. That is why our environment, we always have the order. So the needs of the community needs to be considered. How the children interact with the objects, how do they interact with other people in the prepared environment? They have to learn how to help themselves, how to help the environment, how do they apply their skills. Okay, and of course, order is very crucial. We just talked about the materials have to be in order. The presentations, it has order by itself within the presentation. Children at the very beginning are not good at putting the environment back in order. But with our presentation and with our assistance, children are able to gradually maintain the order of the environment and furthermore develop order of the environment. But it all started with us exhibiting how to maintain the order and create the order so that children eventually, when their movement and language get there, they will develop the order. And with our materials, most of the time, whenever possible, we have built-in control of error, either mechanical or it could be sensorial. So control of error is a very important concept for our children, that they can work with the materials without being told that they're wrong, but they can discover their own mistakes and correct it by themselves. And that's why all of the materials need to be scientifically proven and experimented and we need to introduce it in a scientific way. Okay. And also we need to assist children's independence. Language and movement are the most important element for the children to reach independence. So that is something we have to pay attention to a lot. Whenever the children can do something, our role is to help them to do it by themselves, not doing it for them. We only provide necessary help. And so it requires you to observe them and help them accordingly. And we also need to give them choices, because the ability to make choice is based on knowledge. That is why we need to connect children with the materials, give them presentations. However, also notice that receiving presentation is not just through adults, not just through trained adults. It is also through them observing other children, observing you giving presentation to other children. And they might take it in and they're able to do something about it. So once they have the knowledge, they can then better choose for themselves. And gradually, they become better and better at making their own choices. And the choices become more beneficial to their own development. And then they're more able to sustain their work it all the way through to completion. And that is an exhibition of the will. So will has to do with choice, but choice needs to be based on knowledge. A choice based on knowledge is more likely to induce the development of will and development of concentration and the children's confidence as well. And you need to allow repetition. That's why our environment is set up with a lot of tangible material that children are able to freely choosing once they've been presented to them. And they can choose however many times, as long as they need it. But we also need to pay attention to the layers of repetition. When you give a further presentation or exercises or games, it means that you're deepening their repetition. It's the same concept, yet at a deeper level of abstraction. That is also repetition. Repetition doesn't mean you repeat the same thing over and over again only. It is also the same concept, but at a different level of repetition. And also, so in order for the children to understand the guidelines of the environment, it is really that you have to make things very, very straightforward. Don't use very complex concept. Do not try to explain it to children. But the 3 hard rules, the 3 hard laws are the most important. They're just no. But the soft laws, you need to do it through presentation over and over again, and it becomes a culture of the environment. And the culture of the environment will take care of the children itself. And it will be passed on through the different generations of the environment. Okay, and so that is our responsibility. Okay, so I just talked about the development of will and how important it is, and that brings us to talk about there are 3 stages of obedience. It's very important that we understand the first level of obedience is that the child does not obey at all. They don't obey you at all. They only obey to their inner drive. They obey to their horme. There's a voice telling me, go touch that. I mean, they just cannot tell you. Well, but there's a voice say, touch it. I don't know why I touch it. You can ask Tiffany. She's working with toddlers. You can ask toddlers, why did you do that? That is a dumb question to ask in the toddler environment. Even in the Casa dei Bambini, ask a 2.5 or 3-year-olds, why did you do that? I don't know. If they can give you a reason, that is really bizarro. They don't have a reason because it's there. So I do it. So they obey to their hormone at the very beginning. But slowly, when they have more ability, they have more movement and language ability, sometimes they obey you, sometimes they don't. When they obey, it is because their movement and their language is there, that they can choose to control their movement and their language to obey. But there were times that they're not there yet. So even when they want to, they can't obey. It still falls back to their inner drive. So sometimes obey, sometimes not obey. However, if you help them to do so many different things that they can do, they can use their movement, they can use their language, they have the will, they have the knowledge, they can make good choices for themselves, they will always obey. They are not obeying you, but they have the ability to choose to obey. So obedience has to do with their ability, okay? And so a classroom with children who look normalized, or we say, look free, it means that they have a lot of ability so they can choose. So you must create the condition to allow them to make choices freely. You have to allow them to repeat freely. You have to allow them to move about freely. They can communicate freely, simply speaking. So as adults, what you need to do is that every morning, you need to provide a 3-hour interrupted work cycle. Do the best that you can. Uninterrupted meaning that you cannot all of a sudden give them a Spanish lesson or Chinese lesson. Whatever lesson you want to give them, you cannot take them out of the classroom to do that. The 3 hours has to be continuous and uninterrupted. And you need to set guidelines. It has to be very precise and not complex. Okay, we're going to have to work on that. And so you can create a set of guidelines for your reference in the future that serves as a beginning point of you learning how to set up guidelines. And you need to have correct attitude towards the child, meaning always look at their development instead of judging their behavior. And you need to create an environment that supports independence, needless to say. Okay, so I'm going to end with Dr. Maria Montessori's another quote. This quote is from the 1946 London lecture and is published by Montessori Pearson Publishing Company, 2012 version, page 238. She said, "You must see these new children in this new light. Inside man is a hidden nature and a hidden energy. The kingdom of childhood is the kingdom of heaven. If the child has the freedom to develop at this age, the result will become manifest at the adult age. It is difficult to learn cohesion at the adult age. Little children are disciplined if they have freedom." End of quote. But that is also to say, if we are not very good at setting limits, there is no freedom, because a river without the banks will create disaster rather than running to the ocean. So that leaves us a lot to think about until we meet again tomorrow, and we're going to give you the introduction